Oh no, look who it is.
Oh my God.
Hey.
Afternoon, gentlemen.
How's my audio? Is this okay, or do I need to switch to something else?
That sounds good.
I'm on AirPods.
Interesting. They sound pretty good.
I've been very impressed with the AirPods.
Maybe they should start up an AirPod sharing program.
Rent an AirPod.
They need to extend to more intimate areas of sharing. Yeah. Like
Easy.
I see that we're being recorded now, so.
Now I have to edit. I can't. That's over the top. Let's get started here. So we're trying out this new format here on the Device Squad podcast, the podcast for the mobile enterprise from Propellix and Anexinet company, trying a little more informal approach based on the findings of one of our guests today, Ned Bellavance, host of Anexipod and Buffer Overflow, two fantastic tech podcasts.
Oh, thank you.
Be sure to check those out. We got 5 people in the room here, all males of varying degrees of whiteness, unfortunately. But we do what we can here at Device Squad. And so today's topic is when sharing isn't caring. We're going to talk about the rise of sharing as a business model and why it's turning out to be a complete disaster in more ways than one.
I don't know. I felt like Barney always told me that sharing is caring, so I'm a little confused, Stephen.
Well, my good friend Ned Bellavance, we will clear everything up right after the intro. Device Squad, fighting crimes against enterprise mobility worldwide. Bad UI, frustrating user experiences, poorly conceived mobile strategies, we defeat them all. This podcast series will cover all aspects of enterprise mobility, including strategy, development, design, testing, and more. My name is Steve Brickman. I'm a mobile strategist and UX architect with Propellix. First, a brief history of the company. Founded in 2011, Propellix is a mobile strategy consultancy helping enterprises worldwide devise true mobile strategies and develop world-class mobile applications across all industry verticals. Propellix clients include large companies like Amway, Bright Horizons, Bank of Montreal, Dubai Airports, Family Dollar, DLL, Cintas, Merck, and many more. Propellix menu of services includes 8 different mobile kickstarts, covering everything from mobile strategy and road mapping to MCOE to UI UX design to mobile testing strategy, along with soup to nuts app design development and support. Additionally, Propellix offers 3 homegrown enterprise mobile products. Yeah, okay, so let me introduce everybody that we have here first. How about that? So that was Ned Bellavance, Cloud Solutions Director at Anexinet. And then we also have Glenn Gruber, Senior Mobile Strategist.
Hey, Steve.
How's it going? David Enarson, Mobile Strategist with Propellix, and James Hoshor, Mobile Strategist with Propellix. So we're going to be talking about Uber, car ride sharing, bike sharing, scooter sharing, and what's happening with all of those and why and what can be done about it or what should be done about it.
Do you want to start with ride sharing? We'll start with the biggest thing, which is cars, and we can work our way down to tiny little scooters.
Yeah. I mean, who came first? Uber probably came first, right? Or did bike sharing come first or did Uber sharing come first? Did anybody do their homework on this?
I believe that bike sharing did precede Uber.
Yeah.
But I think it struggled to be successful in a lot of cities, just trying to figure out the logistics of where do you place the bikes? How do you track the bikes? How do you collect them and repair them? And, some cities are better suited for bike sharing than others. I would imagine a city like Chicago in the winter is not great for bike sharing. I think we're going to run into the same problem with scooters. But I think with the rise of mobile technologies, it really made bike sharing and then also ride sharing to a certain degree much more accessible and easier to use. I mean, for the bikes, you can put some sort of tracking device on all of the bikes so you can at least figure out where they are. You can use that location data to map user patterns and figure out where the best place to put bikes are. On the ride sharing side, the ability for everyone to order up a ride using an app really shifted it from, the traditional way of calling up, a dispatcher and asking for a taxi.
Yeah, well, we know where all the bikes are now. They're all in a giant pile in Shanghai.
Well,
It's more than two, less than
So-
the.
yeah. So I think a couple of things. Like, first of all, I think now that Ned's done, we're probably done with the podcast because he covered most of the
I
points.
pretty
already,
much covered.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
But I do think that one of the things that changed bike sharing and solved some of the problems that had, like when I used to live in New York and they were first rolling out the city bikes, is that you always had these docks. So you had to pick it up from a very specific place and then drop them off at another very specific place where you had these docks to take them in and out of. But I think some of the changes in mobile technology, not only to just track, but to be able to, essentially unlock the bicycle and to now have what they refer to as the dockless bicycles, where you can, pick them up anywhere that you find one, use your phone to, kind of scan a barcode and unlock that bicycle via the app, and then just drop it off anywhere. Really changed the game because, I think to the earlier point, the bikes weren't always where you needed them to be. And it also limited from a city planning and data perspective, knowing really where did people want to go, because you constrained their start point and their end point in a very significant way with the docked bicycle model. And, it creates other problems by being allowed to leave these things, virtually anywhere. But it solved the problem of really meeting that last mile need for people's transportation, and then also getting a much better understanding of where are people going, where do these provide the most value. And, in a recent A16Z podcast, well, maybe not so recent, it was, I think, back in February, they were talking about how this showed traffic patterns, and even the cities themselves started to use that data to decide where to put in bike lanes, where to maybe do things like change streets that were one way to two way to try and shunt, the more through traffic of actual cars to different streets, by making it less convenient to go through these now more congested streets and improve overall traffic flow. So
That is really interesting, but that's also a benefit that they could have seen simply by distributing little free GPS speedometer devices or something, saying that we're going to give you free speedometers for your bikes or whatever, or free GPS units, and then just, with the agreement being that they'll track them, and then suddenly they're tracking every bicycle that's out there.
We've seen it really, I think, provide better value in the larger cities. So being in Omaha, which is obviously very small compared to some of the cities that you guys reside in, they've done the bike sharing over probably the last 5 years, but the spin that they took on it initially was Blue Cross Blue Shield of Nebraska was the big sponsor, and they were trying to promote, healthier lifestyles of living. And so they do have the dock style bikes, and they are located specifically in kind of more of the historic areas of Omaha. Like we have the downtown area they call the Old Market, and so they put it down there because there's a riverfront bike trail and some the area spans over probably about 20 square blocks or so. And so they're trying to promote it from when the tourists come, they can get on a bike, they can do the bike trail and see some of the historic sites along the river there, and then go through the Old Market. Same thing out in Midtown area of Omaha. They've done a similar thing right next to a bike trail, more towards some different unique shopping areas and stuff. So their spin on it's been a little different than what some of the larger cities have been doing, which is trying to solve the issues of the congestion of all the cars, and especially the single occupancy vehicles, that are trying to find parking. I recently witnessed that when I was working on a project with some of our teammates out in San Francisco. Parking was just horrendous out there. And it's just, you could sit there and spin around for 20, 30 minutes trying to find a parking spot. But you saw people driving these share bikes and they were just easily weaving in and out and going everywhere. So I think what I've seen is definitely difference in the size of the city or the geographic area that they've been launched in anyway.
So where are we seeing these bikes becoming, just a huge problem in terms of being discarded? And we see there's a link that I'll post on our Propellix blog to this article in the Atlantic that just shows the oversupply of abandoned bikes in Shanghai and other places in China.
I think that speaks to like a different problem. Like the fact, I took a look at those pictures of all the gajillion bicycles, but that was an oversupply problem more than
an inevitable problem.
Yeah, I mean, like I think eventually, like there's this gold rush where, especially in China, where people rode bikes a lot to begin with, as opposed to maybe what you see in America. But so many people were rushing to kind of create these businesses, and they felt like in order to win, they had to be everywhere, that you had this glut of all these bikes. And eventually kind of water finds its own level. And so, yes, you've got these bicycle graveyards, as they put it in the article. But I think eventually you'll get to the point where we have the right number of bikes out there. I think that problem is solvable over time. But that's different than, like I think it was San Francisco, where they've actually impounded all of the bikes that like Lime and Bird have until they get their regulation set, because people were putting them in front of, doorways and, just making it really challenging to get in and out of places. So, that's the part where the regulation has to come in to make sure that, we can have this stuff, and the dockless bicycles, can make a lot of sense, but we also have to do it in a way where it doesn't become a nuisance.
So, right. And I actually witnessed that firsthand, Glenn. So, I mean, that's a great example from when we were working on the project recently down in Mountain View, and we went to Cupertino there. That was the problem that we saw firsthand, is that all these bikes were just kind of piled outside of the boutique shops and restaurants and things, and just made it very cluttered and hard to just even walk around that area to find restaurants and such, just because you're afraid you're going to trip over all these bikes. And one of the colleagues, Shahab, had mentioned that as well, that they're still trying to figure out the best way to solve the issue of people just discarding them at will, just anywhere along a sidewalk or out in front of a shop. And who then takes that and repurposes it to a space where it can be easily found, and it's also not in the way.
Right. That's the irony, right, that makes this story so appealing, is that this program that was meant to replace cars and reduce pollution and get people out riding and give them some exercise, and is meant to, encourage the sharing and all this stuff, is turning out to be an environmental disaster, and also, a nuisance that actually inhibits people's ability to get around.
I think that the title of your podcast kind of hits it on the head. It's the sharing is not always caring. But I think the thing that a lot of the people, using these services are struggling with now is this is a new technology or a new service that's available to them. And we haven't developed like norms around what is considered a caring act in the context of this technology or service versus what's an uncaring act. And you think that most people would look at a whole pile of, bikes that are blocking an entrance and go, okay, that's not caring. I probably shouldn't put my bike there. But if there's not a, solid alternative, then they don't have anywhere else to put that bike. So I guess part of it is back on the companies to help educate consumers on how to use their solution in a way that's appropriate and caring. And it also raises, I think we were going to get into it later, some of the safety issues that exist with the bike sharing and especially the scooter sharing.
Yeah, what we need? We need autonomous bicycles. That's it. That would solve the whole problem.
Look, I'm already worried about autonomous cars coming to murder me in my sleep. Bicycles are going to have a much easier time.
Could be like some like training wheels that pop out, and then the bike just drives itself back to its, wherever they're stored, and then when you need one, you just call it up, and then one just drives to you.
I wonder if they could do something with Roomba, because I mean, essentially,
There
Roomba
you
goes
go.
back and docks itself when it's finished its job. Could we borrow some of that technology and put that into the scooters so they could go park themselves where they should be?
Maybe you
but
could
we just got a Roomba, and I will tell you that yes, it does find its way back, but I wouldn't say that it's got a great guidance system. If you just see like the random various sundry ways where it makes its way through our house, so I'm not sure that's our best analogy.
Roomba sharing. That's what we need. Roomba sharing.
Yeah,
So
I mean, I would even
important.
like you see in the Best Buy videos, I would love for like one of our cats to actually get on and take a ride on it. Then we can actually have Roomba sharing, but Roomba ride sharing
and cat sharing at the same time.
Frightened of that thing, like you can't believe.
And they just put like a tag around the cat, and then the cat could ride the Roomba to wherever it's gonna be shared.
Maybe you can help get the first chicken to take a Roomba ride.
I'm gonna get that. I'm gonna start the process of securing funding for that. Chicken sharing already exists, so that's perfect because I didn't.
Yeah, it's called the $5 bucket.
I did not have a. Oh my God. I did not have a chicken anecdote for this, and now I do. You can rent chickens. I don't know why somebody would want to rent a chicken, maybe to impress a date or something, but you can actually rent chickens in Massachusetts for however long you want, presumably for the eggs, because you can't eat them, obviously, but that is a thing.
Is that from Steve's Chicken Emporium? Like, is this like a little side business that you've created?
I'm trying to think of a pun. Go ahead.
I think it's also important to think about like the traffic flow of people. So, we're talking about all of these, like, and I've seen them too, like in San Francisco, all of these birds and limes, like everywhere. But in some of the dock sharing models, they have people whose jobs it is to like reposition like where the bikes are during the day. Because like if everyone is riding their bike downtown for work, they may need to position those bikes elsewhere for later in the day because there's going to be a surplus of bikes in one location. So I think in addition to the number of bikes or scooters or what have you, I think it also has to do with people's movement patterns and making sure that that's balanced out, and where it isn't, finding ways to rebalance that.
No, definitely. That's actually like in that A16Z podcast, they brought that up where you've got these people who basically it's like a gig economy. It's like you get bonus based on how many bikes that you pick up because they're only just to be picked up to be repositioned, but also to be serviced, or in the cases where some of them are e-assist, bikes with like a little engine, they need to be recharged and things like that. So there's a whole secondary infrastructure piece behind it that the tracking and the GPS location of all of those bikes is really critical too.
Yeah, that sounds like a great summer job. Just run around and chase bikes down and charge them.
Sounds like a great job for a robot. We need robots. We got to get Boston Dynamics on this.
Sounds like a good job for the taxi drivers, right? Since Uber's taken over the world, they need something else to do besides playing backgammon at the airport, wait for the next ride. They can go pick up all the bikes and reposition them.
Really?
Charge the bikes. And another thing to think about too is like how does people's like mental model change when it's something that they're renting versus when it's something that they own? Because people have ridden bikes for forever, and when you own a bike, you don't just like take your bike hopefully you don't just take your bike and ride downtown and then just park it in the middle of the street. You like lock it to a fence or to something like that. So it's just interesting to me that kind of there's a mental shift when it's it's not my bike or it's not my scooter, that I feel like, or someone feels like this sense of entitlement where they can just dump it anywhere. So it's just interesting that that's emerged.
Yeah, well, that's why probably New York went with the docked, cycle model initially, because otherwise, you would put them out there and they would magically disappear over time. Or you'd see your first bicycle on cinder blocks.
I think you have to make it easy enough for the consumer to do the right thing. I feel like people's ethics have very low threshold. So if you make it X amount harder for them to find the right place to put the bike, they're just going to leave it wherever. But if you make it just easy enough that it's not a hassle for them, the vast majority of people will be like, okay, I'll put it in the right place. But, as soon as they encounter any kind of resistance, they're like, this is good enough. I'm going to leave it here.
That is a great point, though, that Dave brings up. I mean, we all know how, traditionally we might be inclined to treat a rental car. I imagine it's the same with bikes, and maybe that's why. So I was like shocked. How can so many of these bikes be getting damaged? But maybe that's part of it.
Mm-hmm. It's a tragedy of the commons.
What is that, some kind of quotation?
No, it's an actual thing. It's the tragedy of the commons would be the common area for any town. And the tragedy of the commons is if no one's responsible for maintaining that area and you don't have a strong sense of community pride within the town, then the town commons goes to pot.
That's very good. There was recently a comparison done between Japanese public bathrooms and American public bathrooms.
I don't want to talk about that.
And I think you can imagine the results of that. But
I knew you would somehow bring this back to urinals or something like that.
Yeah,
that's just your thing.
Don't forget to do a Google search for Brickman UX of urinals for in-depth analysis. Thank you for bringing that up, Glenn.
Yeah, and for those of you who are listening, he's not joking. He's actually written an article about that. So
that's not a joke. Also, Dave brings a nice point that leads us to the discussion of Uber and Lyft and how some of these ride-sharing companies are negatively impacting their local environment in different ways. There was a CNN Money article that recently talked about how New York is capping the number of ride-share vehicles that they're going to allow. Currently, there are 80,000 rideshare vehicles in New York City compared to 13,000 cabs. Who saw that coming? I mean, well, clearly Uber saw that coming because they worked really hard to fight any kind of legislation capping the cars.
I think you just have to look at the ridiculously inflated value of taxi medallions to understand that there was a really huge imbalance between supply and demand when it came to, available taxis or rides. The reason the medallions were so expensive is because there was such a limited number of them in comparison to the number of people who wanted a taxi.
Yeah, and I think that brings up a good point that like the nature of rides, at least in the city, the nature of rides has changed from perhaps longer trips less frequently to now, people take an Uber down the street like a few blocks or something like that. So they're getting a lot more volume. So there's a lot more cars out there to handle that.
Where are you guys on this issue? Are you more on the side of the cabbies? Or are you more on the side of sort of the free market Uber model?
I think that there's something happening right now with the free market model of the ride shares where most of the rideshare companies such as Lyft and Uber have multiple products now, and their base product, such as the UberX, at least in larger cities, the economies are perhaps driving, quality down in the sense that they're trying to maintain the volume, they're trying to get more drivers onto the platform. So there's just been instances where perhaps the car isn't in the best shape or it hasn't been the best experience. So that's an example of where perhaps the economics are not working in the best interest. But the problem is with the way the model is set up is that if they don't offer that entry level, a competitor will, and they'll get beat out on that. So it's kind of like the economics are forcing that product to where it is.
Yeah, and just recently, we've seen 6 taxi drivers actually take their own lives because they didn't see a way to make it work, to make a living, anymore as a cab driver in New York. And presumably they've, sunk their entire life savings into their medallion.
So, some of that is also driven by the fact that Uber and Lyft, like their goal is to get as many possible drivers out there to suck up as much demand, because since they are not employees, since they're not really bearing any of the cost of goods, as it were, they don't care. As long as soon as someone asks for a car, that there's someone out there who can fulfill that ride. But they don't care whether or not anyone's really making money out of it, whether or not their costs to support being out there on the road, can make it profitable or provide a good wage. I mean, that one of those articles that you shared talked about the fact that you have a lot of people. I mean, forget the medallion cost, but you just have a lot of people who are bearing all of the cost of actually going out, and whether it's for wheelchair accessible, whether it's for like in New York City, all the cabs have to have certain things in Braille. But if an Uber or Lyft driver wants to have that, first of all, they're not required to have that. But if they wanted to have that, it's up to the driver to bear all the cost to provide that. It'd be slightly different if Uber or Lyft provided all of that sort of infrastructure other than the app to those drivers. So they've just shifted all the costs. So there's no constraint from an Uber perspective, or no reason to put a constraint on the number of drivers. So I think that part of it is unfortunate. Then you look at some of the early issues that Uber, more specifically, more so than Lyft, had with not just safety of how safe is the driving of their drivers, but just the safety from a passenger perspective, because they weren't properly vetting, because there was no incentive to do that. So I think that there's a balance. Like, some regulation is good, but not necessarily to the point of creating such a constraint on supply that it creates some sort of crazy economic situation like Ned was talking about.
There was a point, I'm not totally caught up on this program, but there was a point where Uber was letting drivers purchase their car from Uber or lease the car through Uber. Remember that? And if that
probably just makes Uber more money, because instead of GMAC getting all the financing revenue, now Uber is. So
at least it would give Uber a chance to standardize some of these ideas, offering Braille, adding safety features, and so forth. It's kind of funny. There's so many similarities between the Uber model and the bike share model. So it's like now we've got, all these bikes everywhere. And similarly, now we've got this surplus of Uber drivers everywhere. So it's like we've wound up in the exact situation that we were hoping to avoid to begin with Uber. Everyone was hoping for fewer cars on the road, and now it turns out it's creating greater congestion, and the greater pollution, et cetera, that goes along with that. Same thing with the bike share. And I can't help but make an analogy to the Bitcoin model, where you introduce this idea, this sort of gold rush idea that happens where people think they can make money with Bitcoin. It's with mining. Everybody thought they could start mining Bitcoin and make money. And now, as a result, you've got this massive surplus of these mining machines out there, sucking up energy and polluting the planet and so forth.
And personally, I think the taxi companies need to do like every other company does when new competition enters the marketplace. You got to reevaluate your current business models and figure out, if you want to make a change, and if so, how do you make those changes to compete? I mean, there's no reason why the taxi companies can't develop an app similar to Uber's, where, if you're landing at JFK or whatever, that you could pull up your taxi app and find a taxi or hail a taxi just like you do with Uber, versus them sitting in line and waiting forever to to have a dispatcher call them. I mean, so I get the frustration by them, and it's too bad that some folks have taken their own lives because of that. But it's everything changes. There's all kinds of competition around the world, and just even on the strategy front with us, there's consultants every day out there. But we're changing the way that we're trying to market ourselves and look at different opportunities to keep us employed. And Uber's doing the same thing. Is one of the articles, Steve, you forwarded, that they were talking about the Uber Eats, and now they're doing the bike thing and everything else. Their CEOs looking at, okay, if we're going to get limited on the ride sharing and the automobiles, what other avenues can we pursue that still generates money and gives our independent contractors, employees, other ways to earn money.
And James, I think that you're absolutely right. I mean, the free market should kind of rule, and everyone does need to adapt. And you do see cities like New York, did build. There is a taxi app where you can call a yellow cab, a standard yellow cab. I believe that there might be, in other cities they have that as well. I'm just, aware of it specifically from New York. So they are trying to adapt, but it's still a big shift in that transition. And there's still a reason to try and make sure that everyone's playing by a similar set of rules, especially when public safety comes into play too. So I think that there's a balance. I think that you see the taxi drivers trying to politicize the very tragic suicide of those 6 people, but at the same time you see that the lobbyists for Uber and Lyft trying to politicize things the other way, saying regular taxis don't pick up African Americans and things like so everyone's using their pulpit to put their own spin on it, and none of it really is about getting to the right place for the consumer or the public in general. It's more about trying to make sure that it gets in the right place from their perspective.
Yeah, they also argued that taxis won't go into certain neighborhoods, and Ubers are plentiful in all neighborhoods. The one thing that I thought was ironic too was that and I didn't quite understand it. Maybe you can explain it, but that the cab drivers were pushing for higher wages for Uber drivers because if you average an Uber driver's salary, it winds up being below minimum wage. I didn't understand why they would push for that. It seems like reducing an Uber driver's salary would create fewer Uber drivers, not the other way around. Did you guys?
Yeah, I mean, I saw that, but it's interesting because I don't know about you guys, but when I get into an Uber, especially in the different cities that we travel as strategists, I always ask, and I certainly caveat it that you certainly don't have to share this information, but just out of curiosity, do you make a good living at this, being an Uber driver? And give me a range of what you make and how many hours you work and stuff, just because of curiosity. And I've seen people that have said, I quit my full-time job at Facebook to do this, and I make more money than I was making at Facebook. And I have had people say that I make $120,000. I mean, recently when I traveled to New York with my family, I talked to an Uber driver. He says he makes 120 grand a year. And so, I mean, that's not a bad living. And he doesn't live in the city of New York. He lives outside of the city. He drives in for the day, does his Uber rides, and then he goes home. There was a gentleman in Dallas traveling there recently that said he only works 4 hours a day, and he loves the work-life balance. And the 4 hours a day, he makes enough money to make a decent living now, and doesn't have the stress that he used to have with the job that he was doing prior to that. So it's interesting. You see the articles about Uber drivers making less than minimum wage, and the ones that I've talked to, at least in the travels that I've had, love what they're doing. They think they get paid fair. I've heard from most of them that on average they get 70 to 80% of the fare that they're charging me to take me from A to B. And so it's interesting that, reading these articles recently that people are saying they're making less than minimum wage. To me, I think are they just lazy? And I hate to be harsh that way, but are people just expecting that, oh, I'm an Uber driver, now I'm going to make 6 figures? You still have to go out and work it. You still have to be available. You still have to be courtesy and have the high ratings to be able to get, the number of rides that you are trying to target.
And strategize to find, high traffic areas and high traffic times and so forth. I would assume that the reason for the taxi driver unions pushing for higher wages is that they're trying to hit the Uber directly by forcing them to pay their drivers more, versus if they pay them less, then what has Uber got to lose, right? So,
well, I mean, one thing I noticed with Uber, and I'm sure you guys noticed as well. So remember when Uber first came out, they did the tipping inside the app for the drivers, and then they took that away. Well, then that stirred up the pot, and drivers were being upset and everything else. And so now they've put that back into the app. And so Uber did listen. They brought that back. And I don't know about you guys, I do tip when I feel I've had great experiences with the Uber drivers that have taken me to the airport or the hotel or the client side, et cetera. And there's Uber drivers that I have not had great experiences and certainly don't tip. So, I think Uber's, at least they're continuing to listen and make adjustments in their business model and how they treat their employees. And that's why I think everybody is, wanting to become an Uber driver or Lyft driver. And to me, if you can't beat them, taxi drivers, then look at switching to be an Uber driver, right? So
I guess so.
I think the reason that the taxi union wants to increase the wages of the Uber drivers, I mean, in part it's probably to try to hurt Uber, but it also makes for them the competition a little bit more even, because if they increase the pay that the drivers are getting, then the rates for the travel also go up, which means that the rates for travel in a yellow cab could be the same as Uber if they push up the base pay high enough.
Yeah. So nice article in a journal called inthesetimes.com that's about the Militant taxi drivers union that defeated Uber and Lyft in New York. So you know where that's coming from. They said, over the past 3 years, Uber and Lyft have presented themselves as socially conscious corporations while they have been rendering drivers invisible. Since Uber claims drivers are independent contractors, the company didn't have to pay into unemployment insurance, and drivers weren't presumed to be eligible for it. And in short, misclassification, oversaturation, and deregulation of the fares are at the heart of Uber and Lyft's business model and are the main causes of the impoverishment of drivers.
Yeah, so there isn't like a set. I think there's maybe bands, and it's definitely market driven. Like if you're in certain markets, the bands will be higher, but there's not like a set, salary per se for the drivers. Speaking to what James said, you have to go out and hunt out your fares, and depending on the market you're at, you're going to get a certain rate per mile and then per minute. But it's not like a taxi where there's a very specific meter rate for a city that's consistent no matter what. So I think the people that do really well are those that, take advantage of the surge pricing and events, or they can, make multiples of a typical rate. And then, people that are either not putting in as many hours or taking advantage of those dynamics are not doing as well. So I think that it's creating more of a, dynamic economy there.
Well, the one thing I like about personally for Uber is I like that when you get the estimate of your fare, that's pretty much within a few pennies here or there what you actually pay. Where in the taxis, you have this rate per mile, then you get dinged when you're sitting there waiting at a stoplight and so forth. You just don't really have a good understanding of what the cost is going to be. And so I like the model that Uber introduced to transportation, to where I know it's going to be $6.90 or $35 to get from location A to B and so forth. Just knowing what that's going to cost up front as a consumer, to me, that makes me feel better than jumping in a cab and who knows what it's going to cost.
Right, but I totally agree with that, but that's because that's a technological advantage that Uber and Lyft has, because they're using, like Google Maps data to say that, well, to go from point A to point B is going to take you this long, and therefore they just calculate the price and provide it to you in advance. When you're hailing a cab in New York City, you're jumping in, they have no idea where you're going. So that's why that model of the initial flat rate plus the per mile came in, because there was no intelligence to know what the end location was going to be and what was the state of traffic at that moment. So that's one area where just the traditional taxis are at a huge disadvantage, and where if they do build their own hail apps, they can mitigate that, and you can have that same experience. But at the same time, you can't. You have to know exactly where you're going. When you call the other, and it's not quite the same. The one thing I will say, that going back to that part of the article that you read, Steve, like the funniest thing to me in that article was that reference to Uber being a socially conscious company, because with all of the things that they've had from sexual harassment and how some of their drivers have mugged, raped, whatever, some of the riders, they seem to be about the furthest from that description that I can imagine.
Yeah, it's a great point. You're not going to find any argument that Uber provides the better service from the rider side. Of course, that's a huge reason for their success. Even to the point of the drivers themselves. I was happy when I could finally take an Uber from Logan Airport, which took a while, because the cab drivers are always mean. I don't know why, but they're always in a bad mood. Are
you sure it's not just you?
Yeah, it's the jokes. The funny thing is, you don't have to talk to the Uber driver because he already knows where you're going. Whereas you have to talk to the cab driver and tell him how to get where you're going. But the Uber drivers are always eager to talk, because that's part of what they like about Uber. Is I've heard this from many drivers, that they just enjoy meeting new people and engaging in conversation with folks and stuff. Whereas that doesn't seem to be an incentive for these cab drivers.
I think, Steve, also, and you guys may be surprised to hear this from me, but I think they should have a feature on the Uber app where you can just push a button before you start your ride if you don't want to talk, like if you just want to have a quiet ride. Because I think sometimes you can run into drivers that are talking a lot and you just want to take a break or something. So
yeah,
that's
plus
actually
one on that. Yeah,
that's not a horrible idea. I'll run that by Lisa, who was on the podcast early on, who is a UX researcher for Uber.
The quiet button.
Yeah, it's not bad. So the last thing I wanted to talk about, we'll talk about scooter sharing a little bit, but so let's talk about funding, and the incentive of funding for these companies is obviously a big one. Bird has raised $415 million in funding. Lime has raised $467 million. And those are the only two US-based scooter companies that have gone international. So my question is, how are they able to raise so much money?
Money's cheap right now. That's definitely part of it. Look at interest rates and just like it makes more sense to borrow money and invest it than it does to let it sit in a more traditional structure. So that's definitely part of it. I think another big part of that is fear of missing out. If you're an investor and you didn't get in on the early rounds of Uber or Lyft or any of these other sort of ride sharing, and then you see the valuations taking off, you're like, okay, the next big thing, I'm getting on that. And it seems like scooters might be the next big thing.
Is it also the fact, too, that could be like Facebook, where behind the scenes they're saying we're going to capture all this data and we're going to be able to go sell it to retailers and such about, market trends with the ride shares and the bikes and the scooters, and where people are traveling to and where they're spending their most time and such?
Yeah, I think that's definitely going to be part of it. It seems like at least the agreements that a lot of the scooter companies have started making with cities, where they want to be a little more gentlemanly about rolling out their scooters. Part of that agreement is that they're going to share all the location data with the city, so the city can help improve their traffic flows and those types of things. But I'm sure if you read through the EULA that you accept when you go to ride one of those scooters or install the app, first, it completely indemnifies the company from any injury you get, but it probably also has something in there about ability to share your location data with whoever they deem fit.
Yeah, there's no helmet sharing program that goes along with that.
Yeah, I think that should be maybe part of it. If you're going, 15, 20 miles an hour on a scooter, that might be a good call.
I don't know. I think, let all the Darwin Award winners or contestants go without the helmet as they like, and that'll just make it less congested for the rest of us.
But look at these rates. Both Bird and Lime charge $1 to rent a scooter plus 15 cents per minute of use. And how do you get to $415 million?
These are very capital intensive industries because they have to buy all the scooters in the first place. It's not like, a startup that's just trying to write the next gen mobile app or something, where a lot of their investment is just in, resources to develop the app. These companies actually have to go out and purchase the scooters and maintain them. So they do need more upfront funding to be successful than something that's not so capital intensive.
Yeah, but how are they going to show a return on $467 million?
Well, just from scale. It's just all about scale. Like once you buy enough scooters, which I just personally think is a terrible idea, but for a certain area, then you can continue to service the same number of people. It becomes just recurring revenue. So to Ned's point, you have this initial capital spend, but after that, your operating costs become significantly lower. So it's just spreading out the money over time. And the reason that they're raising so much money in creating these war chests is so that they can quickly expand from one city to the next to the next to the next. And right now, just like in many markets, it's a race to whoever creates that footprint. Especially if we think that city by city there are going to be caps on the number of scooters or the number of people, number of companies who can participate. Plus also just like word of mouth, like you recognize a Lime bike because of their color. It's just get me enough money so I can get enough places, and then I'll win from here to the end of the time. And then they'll go from being a scooter company to a real hoverboard company or jetpacks, whatever it is. But There'll be Lime Bird jetpacks, and then the Bird name will actually make some level of sense.
Well, I certainly think there's going to be a limit to what, geographically speaking, because, and like I think somebody mentioned earlier in the podcast about weather and stuff, in Nebraska, it snows and it's icy and rainy and crappy 3-4 months out of the year. I mean, you're certainly not going to rent a scooter in Nebraska those months. So there's got to be limited revenue potential for some cities versus others that the temperature and weather year round is more favorable.
And then eventually they got to turn into a battery company because, whenever I go to the dump here in town, I always see at least one electric scooter. How much could it have been used? But the battery is dead. So apparently these things don't last that long. So they've got to swap out all these batteries.
All of these companies, Uber and Lime and Bird, they're using investor dollars to buy market share. So, the scooter companies are likely doing that more aggressively since they're starting out. Uber's still doing that. And it'll just be interesting to see that, how all of that levels out, because you can't do that forever. So it'll be interesting I think that we won't see it as much with the scooter companies, because there's going to be a lot more patience for them to get to, more of a critical mass and to work out the business model. But with ride sharing and those types of more mature businesses at this stage, I think that there's going to be more operational pressure on those to get a return on the investment.
So Is there a solution? What is the solution? Is this just an inevitable development given this new business model and the way the free market works? And is there nothing we can do about it? Do you guys have any ideas around that?
I think despite the fact that we like to have a somewhat orderly world, the world has other ideas. So I think this is just the natural maturity of a new service. As the kinks get worked out, they're going to get worked out in real time in the real world. And you're going to have that initial bike graveyard or two. There'll probably be a scooter graveyard shortly thereafter. But then we'll hit the right mix of how many devices actually need to be available. What's the proper protocol for, leaving them somewhere and then having them picked up. And city planning might change to accommodate these type of vehicles better. And there's a big, thing looming on the horizon, which is autonomous vehicles and how they're going to vastly change the landscape once those become commonly available.
I kind of agree, that this is natural in some ways. I think it's natural because we do have, from a city perspective, constraints as to how many more cars, especially as we're moving back towards people wanting to be in urban centers. How many more cars can we really have, on the road so that a 5-mile commute doesn't become a 45-minute drive? So I think as a last mile solution, a lot of this makes sense. I think how far it goes is also going to be a cultural thing. Like in Belgium, in Denmark, in different countries, riding bikes is that's just a thing. That's just part of the culture. That's not here. I mean, I think was it James who mentioned that people are taking Ubers to go 3 blocks down the street because Americans are maybe slightly lazier than others. So how far this goes, I think, is really going to be predicated more on culture than anything else. I do think that with the scooters, there's a safety concern more so than maybe some of these other modes of transportation, just because you have a lot of people who have never been on scooters before, let alone ones that can go at 15 miles an hour. So there's more of a safety concern there, and that one may not go quite as well as things like bicycles. But we'll see.
Yeah, one of the articles that I posted was from CNN, a doctor who was citing all the injuries that they're seeing, the new injuries from scooters going 15 miles an hour, with people unaccustomed to going 50 miles an hour on a scooter riding them. I guess the only real solution is either to impose caps, as New York has done, or to just allow the physical limitations of the environment to set the limit. There's only so many bicycles that are going to fit in a certain town, and only so many Uber drivers are going to fit in Manhattan. And I don't know how much more can be done other than that. Hopefully we won't also have a graveyard for taxi drivers. On that note,
A great conversation, everybody.
As always.
All right, anybody want to take this home?
You've listened to another episode of Device Squad. I don't know how the rest of it goes, but
the podcast for the mobile enterprise from Propellix and Anexinet Company. And don't forget to check out Ned's podcast over on Anexinet, Bufferflow and the Anexipod, both fantastic. And also check out the Emerging Technology Council at emergingtechcouncil.com. Glenn Gruber runs that council, and you can get real world advice from today's technology experts. So be sure to check that out. All right. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, guys, for hopping on.
Thanks,
You bet.
David.
Thanks, Dave.
Glenn,
Bye-bye.
James, Dave, Ned. Take care. Bye-bye. See you next time.